Water makes up about 60% of your total body weight, and it is constantly moving, freely flowing back and forth between two main zones, the intracellular compartment, which is the space inside your cells, and the extracellular compartment, the fluid surrounding them. The entire point of this continuous fluid movement is to achieve one highly specific goal: keeping the exact amount of water inside your cells completely stable. To control this flow, your body relies on sodium. As the primary positively charged ion outside your cells, it acts as the undisputed boss of water movement. Where sodium goes, water follows. This diagram demonstrates the law of osmosis in action. It shows how water diffuses passively from an area with a low concentration of dissolved particles toward an area with a high concentration. The water simply moves across the membrane until the pressure on both sides balances out. But not all particles have the power to pull water. Inactive osmoles, like urea, exert very little pull. It is the active osmoles, primarily sodium and glucose, that actually dictate this osmotic pressure. The survival of every single cell in your body depends entirely on balancing the pressure created by that extracellular sodium. If it fluctuates too much, the cell either dries out or bursts. We can calculate this delicate balance using a specific formula known as the Edelman equation. It states that your serum sodium concentration equals the total amount of sodium divided by the volume of water. For a healthy adult, this final value needs to stay in a tight, safe zone, between 135 and 145 millimoles per liter. To keep that number stable, your body has to manage the bottom half of the fraction, the volume of water. When your blood becomes too concentrated, receptors in your hypothalamus detect the change and trigger the sensation of thirst, driving your intake. On the output side, your brain releases antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. If plasma concentration gets too high, ADH signals your kidneys to restrict urine production and hold on to water. Then we look at the top half, the amount of sodium. Humans do not have an internal mechanism to regulate sodium intake. We just ingest what's in our food and drink. So controlling this number relies entirely on output. Two hormones handle this process. Aldosterone forces the kidneys to reabsorb sodium back into the blood when levels drop. Conversely, atrial natriuretic factor, or ANF, triggers the kidneys to flush sodium out when levels get too high. Every day of your life, your body is quietly making continuous, invisible adjustments to this specific fraction, fighting to keep the total value perfectly stable. When that serum sodium concentration breaks past 146 millimoles per liter, you enter a dangerous state called hypernatremia. The fluid outside your cells becomes incredibly concentrated, creating severe extracellular hyperosmolarity. Looking at the equation, the first mechanism is water loss. If you lose massive amounts of fluid through heavy sweating or severe digestive issues, the denominator drops dramatically. Mathematically, the overall value spikes high into the red zone. This spike happens with renal losses too. Diabetes insipidus or osmotic diuresis cause kidneys to dump water, shrinking the denominator. Conversely, the second mechanism is sodium overload. Intravenous saline or disorders like hyperaldosteronism and Cushing syndrome inflate the numerator. The total value skyrockets. Regardless of whether the water drops or the sodium spikes, the result is identical. The extracellular fluid becomes highly concentrated, creating a powerful vacuum that violently pulls water out of the cellular compartment. The primary consequence is intracellular dehydration. As water is dragged out to balance the concentrated plasma, the cell is literally desiccated and collapses inward. This cellular shrinking manifests physically. The patient experiences intense thirst, rapid weight loss, fever, and severe dryness of the skin and mucous membranes. You will often see signs of extracellular dehydration as well. As the total volume of fluid in the bloodstream plummets, it causes a racing heart, low blood pressure, and flat, collapsed veins. If the serum sodium crosses the dangerous threshold of 160 millimoles per liter, the symptoms turn critical. The patient faces devastating neurological disorders, seizures, coma, and eventually total cardiovascular collapse. When serum sodium reaches these extremes, human brain tissue begins to physically desiccate. On the opposite end of the spectrum is hyponatremia. defined as a serum sodium drop below 135 millimoles per liter. It becomes profound and highly dangerous when it falls under 120, creating a state of extreme extracellular hypoosmolarity. Let's check the chart again to see how the fraction breaks down. Mechanism A is water retention. Whether through excessive intake, like a psychiatric condition known as podomania, or an inappropriate secretion of ADH, the water volume denominator expands massively. The overall value plummets. Mechanism B is a simultaneous retention of both water and sodium, typically driven by severe heart or liver failure. Both sides of the fraction increase, but the fluid volume swells much faster than the sodium, keeping the final value heavily suppressed. Mechanism C is a loss of both water and sodium through intense vomiting, massive diarrhea, or severe burns. The body is losing fluid, but the total sodium plummets far quicker, again crashing the final fraction. You'll see this exact same math play out with renal sodium losses, often caused by heavy diuretic use or acute adrenal insufficiency. When the serum sodium value crashes, the extracellular environment becomes incredibly weak. The flow of osmosis reverses direction, violently forcing water back into the cells. This brings us to the terrifying reality of intracellular hyperhydration, cellular edema. As the dilute plasma forces water inward, the cell rapidly balloons, its membranes stretching to the breaking point. Patients exhibit severe nausea, fever, and a total aversion to water. But the ultimate danger lies in the brain. Because brain cells are trapped inside the rigid casing of the skull, their swelling creates massive physical pressure, leading to seizures, coma, and rapid onset neurological collapse. Because of these extreme physical risks, severe dysnatremias are frequent, high-stakes crises managed under close watch in intensive care units. Resolution depends on backtracking from the outward symptoms to the underlying pathophysiological mechanism, finding precisely where the Edelman fraction broke down. Treatment requires absolutely patience. The medical team must correct the imbalance progressively. If a physician forces the serum sodium back to normal too quickly, the sudden, violent fluid shift will tear the cellular structures, triggering devastating iatrogenic neurological damage.